Hello, today is Saturday, and it is the 9th of June, 2012, and this video I'm going to take a quick commentary on Rand Paul endorsing Mitt Romney, and then take a look at silver, and pretty much just silver in the Canadian dollars. I had a request if you could do a chart comparing the Canadian dollar to the gold and silver markets. I'm wondering if there might be a correlation in the markets. Reason being is that living in Canada, I have to buy silver in US dollars. Silver prices are generally dropping now, but so is the value of the Canadian dollar. Okay. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but first, this is a YouTube search for that of Paul Romney. And I've searched this by upload date, which gives you the newest information. So as I'm doing this at 11:44 a.m. Eastern Time, then GNut did a video uploaded 28 minutes ago, and you can see the rest of them as well. And in page 2, you can see some other ones as well. And there we go. What I have to say about this is I'm overall not surprised, but I think the best response can be found in this video in here, which is one that I did on August 11, 2010, roughly 2 years ago. Linda McMahon defeats Peter Schiff in Connecticut, where I basically state that the electoral system is fraudulent in itself, that if you want to make changes, you really got to go against the grain, think outside the box, if you will. And this electoral system just doesn't work, quite frankly. So I pretty much have to say the same thing regarding that. And what type of strategies can be used, quite frankly, I don't know. I'd be confident that if 10-15% of the population decide to go on a citizen strike, maybe they, on the same day, at the same time, they all go to all the different banks, all the different government offices, with a lot of people working on the outside, working in inside of technology or doing stuff behind the scenes, videography and so on, that there might be a better chance that the change can be made. But by electing somebody just doesn't work. And then what's even worse is then you donate money to their cause, or donate, I shouldn't say money, I should say Federal Reserve notes. So you donate legal tenders to the cause. Quite frankly, it just does not win. Okay, so that's that. Now let's go on to the US dollar, Canadian dollar. First off, this is a very long-term chart of the US Canadian dollar, and this goes back to pretty much the start of the Canadian currency. But quite frankly, I'm just going to start it roughly around here, which is in between 1847 and 1920. What's important here, when I first got my attention within this sideways consolidation range, is that the Federal Reserve started in 1913. And from that point on, the U.S. currency just got obliterated. And Canadian currency, it must have also got obliterated as well. And I know that just by looking at the price changes over the years. But it stayed within a range of $1 or usually about 20%. There was a huge, massive ceiling at par. Massive, because this whole period it stayed even, then you got this period. It consolidated as resistance here, but never broke down. Same thing here. And it really had a ceiling of even below 20%. It pierced below 1 just a little bit, but the ceiling was like 12 or 14%, maybe even 10, roughly around here. That's about 10%. So it really didn't have much of a difference. Now, as far as 1980, January of 80, that's when the silver price was about $50 at its highs, which means I can see clearly that it was about probably about 18% more, up to 20% during the 1980 high. So if silver was $50 Canadian back then, $50 American, that means it was about 60 or 58 in Canadian funds, which is quite interesting to say the least. And up here, when silver was like $4 an ounce, that means you had that 60%. That's still only about 6.5 or so. So overall, the currencies don't change too much. Now, what I find very interesting is, generally speaking, when the US dollar goes up big, And we'll say big is 1% in a day. That is massive. When that happens in a single day, then you better realize that silver is going to collapse that day or have a bad day, 4, 5%, 6% down. And when the US dollar has a big down day, again, we'll say 1%, well, then the silver, and that's going to go way up, 4, 5, 6, 7% in a day. So now let's reverse the polarity in other countries, especially with the euro, but Canadian dollar as well. So therefore, if the US dollar goes higher, that means obviously silver is going to go lower. So US dollar goes up 1%, silver goes down 5. Well, if you're in Europe or Canada, and that means your dollar went down, and yet silver would have also went down because of the percentile differences. But instead of going down like 5% in the States, it was only down about 4% in your nation. Same thing when the US dollar goes down. It goes down 1%. That means the price of silver is going to go up big, say 5%, yet your currency went up, and so did silver, just instead of 5%, maybe only 4%. So that's why whenever I hear things about, oh, the silver market's got to go way up because of the US dollar strength, I'm not going to say it makes me laugh, but it makes me wonder. I think that would be a better term. Let's take a look at the silver price in Canadian dollars using Net Dania. If you go to Net Dania, this is the how to spell it up in the top left. You can go to charts, and in chart type or instruments, if you go to more instruments, this is where you can see how you can get gold and silver and different currencies. So we're going to use the Canadian dollar here, and we're going to start off within the monthly chart. And if you look at the monthly chart I've been showing, it pretty much is the exact same thing, where you have this resistance field in 2004, and then it consolidates for a while, breaks out, consolidates like that, same thing, finding resistance at support, yada yada, make the highs of 2008. The crash wasn't as bad because this had a high of 2041 and it had a low of about 1116. So it only lost about 47% compared to 60% in the States, but again, only minor differences to say the least. It had the same breakout pattern where it was, the difference here is that it was actually testing the 08 resistance, where in the States, it was a pierce below the resistance, but really the same technical indicators. You had to run higher. This high was 47.36 because on the date of the high, well, that meant that we had silver, or excuse me, the Canadian dollar, as they say, stronger than the US dollar. So at this point, it was still, it still had to go up another 13 or so to reach the 1980 highs. You have a situation with multiple bottoms at the same level, like you do in the States. You can say the exact same. Descending triangle, all that's the same. Now, if you look at this on the daily chart, you can find a few minor differences. Overall, it pretty much works out to the same ordeal. And that is, for example, this bottom here was the 30 low in the States. And we can see here it was a little bit lower in Canada. And then just recently this week, what happened in the States is it pierced just an inch, or well, 9 cents, below this previous low. Where in Canada, it had a decent size push higher, but again, it pretty much trades around the exact same way. And that's why when we take a look at the US dollar index, and let me just see if I could find, here we are, this is the US dollar index. This is a very poor way, in my opinion, of gauging the world's legal tenders, because it's taking the worst of the worst and finding out what is the best of the worst and the worst of the worst. And the currencies that do the best, they're the best of the worst, and the currencies that do the poorest are the worst of the bunch. And therefore, to me, the only way of really checking how well currencies are doing is by looking this at gold. So this is gold in US dollars. And if we take a look at gold in other currencies, say Australia, pretty much the same thing. And if we take a look at it in Canadian dollars, okay, pretty much the same thing. And if we take a look at this in the Swiss franc, pretty much the same thing. And we'll do one final one, which will be the euro. And again, pretty much the same thing. All currencies are pretty much really, really bad. Okay, thank you for tuning in to today's video. Later on, I'm going to go through a couple of charts. Like I said, I did some requests on the weekend, and I was just going through random charts, one of which was a really weird, and I want to show that, one which has what I consider a really good short setup for potential 25% losses within the paper Ponzi game. Thank you for tuning in.